Welcome back to the Trojan Tea. I'm Brennan Crain here with Grace Lowe from the Trojan Times high school newspaper at Barron County High School. I'm the editor and Grace is the columnist for our staff, and this show is pretty much off of any sort of script. It's just as it comes to the mind. I know last episode we addressed several political ideas. This episode we won't necessarily forget about politics, but we won't hound it either. This episode we'll take a look at some basketball things for our sports with district going on and potential region, and then we have some things about our local government, our Glasgow EPB issue. We'll also have some other ideas from Frankfurt after a visit this week, and just kind of what's going on with our local legislators, Steve Riley and David Givens. We'll also talk about Hoda Muthana, which is kind of a burning issue for the country right now as far as just politics go. And we'll also take a look at Black History Month. All of this and more on the Trojan Tea.
All right, so the first item on our agenda today is probably the most interesting thing that's happened for the high school in sports in a little while. Mackenzie England had a buzzer-winning shot. Right?
She did. I talked to her today actually, and just opened up the conversation to her, and I allowed her to really tell me what it was like for her, and I'll let you see that just right now.
Well, as you know, we went into overtime, 47-47. Mason Towery knocked down a three. Really, we went into overtime thinking, we've got to punch them in the mouth. It was 0-0 at the beginning, and with 12 seconds to go, Sarah Sutton knocked down one free throw, missed the first one. That put them up 51-49. So with 1.8 seconds left to go, Coach Lindsay calls a timeout. Draws up a play for Bailey, take it, get 2 points, maybe and one. Well, she noticed that they were slacking off of me, so she was like, Kenzie, just get the ball and do your thing. So I was like, okay. So Bailey passed me the ball, and I stepped up, and I just hit it. As soon as I released it, I knew it was going in.
Excellent.
It felt good. My fans really, they motivate me a lot. When the student section gets into it, when the fans get into it, when the bench gets into it, it's just the fans don't know how much they mean to us on the court. They think we don't hear them, but we do. They influence our play. When we go on a run, they're right there with us. When we're excited, they're excited. But the fans mean a lot.
So, as you know, Mackenzie was really talking about the fan base especially, and how important it is that fans contribute to the team. And not only is that the student section, she said, but also just in general, people wearing burgundy and gold, which is important. And Coach Piper Lindsay also added to that.
The fans and the support that they bring are huge. The kids love it. I was awesome the other night looking up at them, and just the bringing that they brought, and just how loud they get. The kids feed off of that. They do, and so that's a huge part of it. And I think the kids just love playing in front of their friends and having them there, and it means a lot to the girls.
So as you saw, both Mackenzie and Piper, they have the same thoughts, and what I want to touch on in general is just going into the district game tomorrow night, and then segueing into the region tournament. This is completely something huge for especially our Barron County family, and just we're looking ahead to this. But just a few stats here, just what's going on at region and what to expect. So Saturday, the Barron County High School Trojanettes will draw to see who they'll face in the region tournament.
Well, on Saturday we draw, so hopefully we go in as a winner, and if that's the case, then you draw runner-up, which again, you've got your 14th district, which is tough, but anybody, it's anybody's game. Everybody goes in 0-0, and you hope you play well and continue to get better.
And then just In other district matchups, in the District 15 especially, that's the district that we are, we have Glasgow versus Allen County Scottsville. That's tomorrow night as well. And then Glasgow versus Barron County is tomorrow night. Glasgow was the number 1 seed. They beat Monroe County 62-46 in the opening round of the district tournament this past week. Barron beat Allen County Scottsville on Tuesday, and that's the game that had that buzzer-winning shot, and we'll take a look at that now.
Well, I don't even know what I was going to do after I shot it. I just held up the 3 like I made it, and I just kind of ran. I went for my seniors because that was the most important part, was my seniors, just doing that for them. But I just seen them come in, and I was like, oh gosh, here comes the ground. I just knew I was going to fall, but it was great.
Quite an impressive shot at the end of that game. I'm not even sure.
In addition, going into triple overtime. Right?
Exactly, triple overtime. I mean, that's crazy. Obviously, in high school sports, when we even have 1 overtime, that's something huge for anything. But 3 overtimes and a buzzer-beating shot,
exciting.
That's very rare to see, to say the least. Mackenzie made that 3-point buzzer shot after a pass from Bailey Pettigo, and the Lady Patriots had beat the Trojanettes in the regular season, which was actually just last month, 39-47. Well, of course, the Trojanettes have being 39 and the Lady Patriots 47. The Trojanettes are 27-4 so far this season. Of course, that's subject to change depending on the success with tomorrow night's game and in the region. And then it'll be at Monroe County High School at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. Again, Mackenzie and Coach Piper Lindsay, they both pretty much said, if you can come out, because it's that fan support that really helps the team. We focus on the 5 that are on the court, of course, but it's the fan base, I think, that really helps encourage.
The more burgundy and gold we see in that gym, the more hype we are. We're ready to play. We're ready to show people what we can do. And it's just more burgundy and gold, the better we're going to play. That's as simple as that.
It doesn't punish them.
Burgundy and gold in the audience.
Yes, and it doesn't punish them in any way. Let's put it that way. And then, of course, the region tournament is at Diddle Arena in Bowling Green on WKU's campus. And then if we obviously go to state, that would be held at Rupp Arena in Lexington. Just looking ahead, Mackenzie had told me that we have a solid region here. And when she said that, she implied that it's not going to be an easy fight to go through that and potentially go to the state tournament, which would be even more tough if they made it there. So I'm interested to see how the Trojanettes appear and show out.
A lot of momentum going forward.
Exactly.
Right?
It's give all or give none, pretty much, especially for seniors in this season. So we're looking forward to showing that, and of course we'll inform you how things turn out at a later point.
Let's see what's in the newspaper today.
Oh, hi there. I'm Brennan Crain, Editor-in-Chief of the Trojan Times. Happens to be the newspaper I was just reading. It's a pretty good newspaper if you ask me, but I'll let you know a little bit about that paper. It's ran out of Barron County High School's very own English Hall, and it's ran by a staff of students. Yeah, that's right, students are running this paper with the help of a very good advisor who are dedicated to preserving the history of Barron County High School and providing the #1 coverage of all things Barron County High. We've even been out in the community of Glasgow, Kentucky doing a few things, and we're just happy to serve you like that. So give us a check out at thetrojantimes.com. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're on there with pictures and posts, quick updates about school events, and any type of coverage that you need for Barron County High School. Thank you. Welcome back to the Trojan Tea. We're here with Joe Trigg, who is a member of the Glasgow City Council and also possibly in the race for Ag Commissioner. That's correct?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll let Grace start out the conversation here, and we'll see where this goes.
So a lot of people, especially teens and high schoolers who are probably watching this, just really haven't heard of the Agricultural Commissioner or know exactly what that is. So can you give a little description of what that position is in charge of?
All right. First, my name's Joe Trigg. I'm born and raised here in Glasgow. Went into the service for about 30 years. retired, came back to this community, been actively involved in politics. But on the same note, I was also very active in agriculture. We have a 50 cow calf beef operation. We raise vegetables both in the field, sweet corn, tomatoes, and we also raise vegetables inside a greenhouse where we have a hybrid hydroponic / aquaponic operation. So at one point we actually used to sell leaf lettuce to the Barron County school systems under a program called Farm to School. So my involvement with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture goes back a little bit to where I helped the Ag Commissioner Jimmy James Comer with a couple of projects, to include the Homegrown Heroes, which was a agriculture program set up to help veterans enter into the field of agriculture.
So what exactly will you do if you are to win the agriculture commissioner position?
It's interesting that you would say that. I did some research, and the ag commissioner job encompasses a bunch of different departments. If you go to pump gas, you'll see the ag commissioner on every pump. So weights, measure, veterinary services, a lot of consumer product. The ag department covers a
You'll
large...
oversee anything to do with agriculture.
Yes.
That makes sense. So your Democratic primary is coming up this May, so you're getting close. Do you have main campaign, like platform policies?
Right now, my main platform issue is trying to find a way to generate income for small farmers. And I believe that hemp production and medical marijuana are the two so-called lifelines that we can throw out to the small farmers to help them generate income. And the program that I would like to initiate would be along the lines of the old tobacco quota system, where each farm had a tobacco quota and they could generate a small amount of money. And I did a couple of articles in the newspaper about it, calling hemp and medical marijuana a lifeline for Kentucky small farmers.
All right. And are there any farmers here locally that you've been in communication with as far as maybe getting them on board to doing this?
If you talk to most of the farmers in places like the Ritter House or at some of the local gas stations where they're sitting eating lunch, they will say that some kind of program similar to the tobacco quota that would provide them some income would be appreciated. There was a little bit of hesitancy on the marijuana part, but I believe most of us realize that Kentucky is number 2 or number 3 in the production of recreational marijuana anyway, so we might as well see some benefits for everyone versus the black market side.
Right. All right, and just in general, if you make it through the primaries and then obviously into the general election next November, how's your campaign going to change in respect? You said for now you're working on the hemp production, and how will your campaign focus shift?
I don't think this is part of my main platform, so I don't think it will change. More as you get past the primary, then you'll be asked more specific questions. And then you'll have to, the way I work is I like to go out, do the research, find the information, and be able to answer questions in an informed way and make decisions based on facts, not he said, she said.
Excellent.
So you're running as a Democrat, and there's 2 people in that race, yes. And the Republicans also have 2, one of them being the incumbent.
Yes.
So is there anything specific that's motivated you to want to get into the race, dealing with the incumbent or anything?
Well, I was debating whether to enter the race or not, and then I was contacted by different members of the Democratic Party about potentially running for the ag commissioner based on the actions I've taken in agriculture to help other folks, small farmers, mainly like the farmers market programs, value-added products to the cities, to get food from farms to the cities, food from farms.
And you sell locally grown?
And we sell locally grown produce here in town at 2 different locations.
And I'm glad you said that too, because I was going to ask you about, farmers obviously realize how the ag commissioner works. They realize the effect that he or she can have on their everyday job or, lifeline. But what would you tell just the other voters who aren't affected necessarily directly on a farm, how can a farm benefit them, and why should they vote for what you're putting out there?
Let's use, for instance, what I was talking about with the medical marijuana and the hemp. Say you establish a quota system, and then each of the small farms in the local communities will have an opportunity to grow. A lot of folks at Frankfurt and DC, they always say money and wealth will trickle down, and we all realize that doesn't happen pretty often. The way the tobacco quota program used to work, and the way I foresee the hemp and the medical marijuana working is the income generated on the farms would trickle out and up into the small. So before, tobacco made the Summer Shades, the Temple Hills, the Cave Cities, the Heistville's. And then they built upon those cities, helped the money that flowed from them, it trickled up to the Glasgows, the Bowling Greens, and then that money trickled from the Bowling Greens up to the Lexingtons, Louisvilles, and Frankfurt. So the money flowed different, but it flowed out and it had a benefit. So that's what I would see. And then you can use the fact that farmers have more money now to sustain, maintain, and diversify their current operations. So if you have a beef operation and your income is just generated by the beef, then more than likely you're working another job somewhere else. Whereas if you had the other quota system that giving you potentially two products to sell, then you could move that forward and say, hey, I can help in another way.
So you'd want to reverse that trickle-down system and
Yes.
help the local community. That's great.
All right. Well, I think that covers everything we'd like to talk about today in general. Anything that you'd like to tell people about your campaign or about yourself, just a general?
I'm a farmer just like you guys. I grew up in this community. I worked in probably all aspects of different kinds of farming, but I've also lived in the large cities, and for those folks, they need a source of vegetables. The products we produce on the farm are here. My current issue with legislation being proposed for medical marijuana is that the legislation being proposed helps large businesses and we don't gain anything from it. So if you're going to have an ag product grown in Kentucky, I think it should be under the Department of Agriculture.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trigg. Next on the issues here, we're going to talk about the Glasgow EPB board info. Just in brief, I know a lot of media coverage, the media has really sought this issue out. Of course, it's very important for those who live in the city limits especially, or have that EPB rate. But the most recent issue, the board meeting held Tuesday night, which I'll say I was there. There were no spots in that room. They had to limit the amount of people to come in that boardroom. They had police guarding the doors. I mean, it was
Full house.
it was a full house, and it was phenomenal to see that in a small community that we live in. But it was everybody was on edge because there was a potential that their superintendent could have been fired. And the superintendent obviously is the head of that company, and if he's just immediately fired, I mean, that's pretty bad. But just in brief, if you don't know what's going on with the EPB, there's been, it's been several months that things have been going on, and a lot of the community is in backlash over just different electricity rates and how these rates are pretty much putting them to a point of making or breaking them. The peak demand charges are punishing some people. That's the general thing, is what's being tossed around, because if they don't have enough money, for instance, then they can't afford to turn off large appliances during the peak demand. And I will say, just on a factual note, it is the Tennessee Valley Authority that is pretty much selling the electricity to the Glasgow Electric Plant Board. And then when the Glasgow EPB likewise charges their customers, it's just pretty much down the line. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that people don't realize. Again, not for or against, just stating the facts, that this issue is it's become one of political motive more than anything.
That EPB doesn't have control over those rates to some extent.
Well, to some extent, I believe the board has some say in those rates, but nonetheless, the peak demand charge is what the TVA originates. The TVA is the main source of, pretty much saying, hey, this is what you can and can't do. And the superintendent especially is just the head of the place. I mean, he is not the rule maker. He doesn't set the rules. He doesn't make the decisions all on his own. Obviously, there's a board there for a reason. But, Tuesday night, it was a turbulent time, especially, upon calling to order of the meeting, they just went in, then chair or former chair now, Jeff Harnett, called the meeting to order, and they went straight in, and sitting to his left was D.T. Froge, who is now the chair of the board. D.T. immediately just threw out the idea that they should adopt the agenda, which he argued that that's in order to do that. So from the initial point of the meeting, it's just confrontation ensued. So, I'm sitting there on the sideline. I'm like, wow, this is happening. Sitting in a local government meeting, you typically think, well, those are just not going to be too exciting. But that was very exciting. We go through the evening, and then in the long run, Billy Ray doesn't get fired based on the facts that there's potential bonding issues, and bonding is simply just investing money into the company. If Grace wanted to bond or buy or invest in a company, she would have a bond, and that bond is under a contract. And so a lot of the time it's typically big money makers or companies that are bonding into companies. And if there's any immediate change, such as the firing of a superintendent, then inside that bond contract,
they'd be able to pull out.
Yes, they have to change it immediately. Like the legal setting of that is that they have to notify those potential bonders. So with that said, if the head of the company is fired, then clearly there's going to be a repercussion there as far as the bond sales go. Now, those bond sales were set to close on March 5th, and as far as I'm concerned, I believe they still will. Of course, Tuesday's board meeting was sort of a success for the side that was vouching that if we make this bad decision and fire the superintendent, then this bond deal or the bond deals that we have will potentially fall through, and who knows where that would have went. So the consequences there were clearly stated, and I think that's really what kind of won the people over on the board in respect to not firing the superintendent. And just as a note, they also wanted to replace the legal counsel of the board. So not only the superintendent, but next on the agenda was removal.
They wanted to turn over a lot in one night.
Exactly, which was seems to be kind of an iffy topic in any setting, and especially in the one that we are with this. Like I said, the bonds are what's holding the EPB. If the bonds fail, then the EPB can ultimately fail. And what does that mean for customers? Well,
a lot worse than peak hours.
Certainly,
right?
I would certainly say that. Again, just holding to the facts and not interjecting an opinion, a political motive or anything, which seems to be the origin here. And a lot of, I will say fairly too, I can understand people say that they have outrageous electric rates because like during the summer, peak is typically like from noon to 6 p.m. So obviously the hottest part of the day. But if you're,
and that's a long time.
That is.
Someone to not have whatever electricity they need.
It is. So what it's turned into is not necessarily, well, we're mad because our electricity rate is that, but it's more like, oh, well, the superintendent is profiting off of our, our stuff.
Right?
That's the proposed thing. Now, again, it's been clearly stated that it's not Billy Ray or anybody on the in the EPB profiting money from other people's suffering, but I'll just say in general that I think that the issue has been blown out of proportion to an extent, but obviously we can't go back and change anything. We're just only moving forward. So we'll update you if anything else progresses with that. If they have another board meeting that kind of brings up anything, then we'll certainly tell you on that. Our next issue of business today, I'll let Grace introduce that.
Steve Riley and David Gibbons have been involved in some notable House and Senate bills One of those being House Bill 1, which deals with school safety. This was passed out of the Education Committee this week and has moved on to the House floor. It would require more personnel and advisors to help students. So, what else does that have?
Well, and I will say I have the legislative record here that was on file at the Capitol this week. And inside of this, they pretty much detail what
that is.
Yeah, it's a brief examination of how the bill looks. Of course, it's not word for word. But I did circle a few things I thought that were notable in this bill. It's a very extensive bill because the summary is 3 columns long. So the bill is ultimately pretty long. But just for a figure here, it would require school district superintendents to appoint a school safety coordinator. They would have threat assessment teams, and they would prescribe policies and procedures to an all hazards approach to school safety. And also there'd be a mandate that they make available each school district an anonymous reporting tool. And I will say, in Barron County,
we have that, right?
We have all of these things already. And I recently heard Superintendent Bo Matthews mention that he feels confident in our school system here, at least Barron County. I can't speak for Glasgow Independent Schools. I'm not sure if they've adopted these policies yet. But as far as Bo Matthews was concerned, he says that he feels confident that we're moving in the right direction because we already have these things at play. I know at the high school we have, the whole idea of Trojans looking out for Trojans. We have the care boxes. We have an anonymous tip line that's district-wide. Students can just go online. They can simply put an anonymous tip. And by the way, I will say I'm not as a PR image for the school by any means, but if you feel confident that you need to give them a tip of something that's concerning you, you need to make sure that you're doing it in a thorough manner because it's important that they trace the issue because they can't go back and look to who submitted it. It's anonymous, obviously. So if you're going to provide something, it needs to be thorough. I just think that this bill can go one of two ways. I feel like it's something that is good because we saw the Marshall County shooting last February, which created sort of this tension in the House, or in the legislature especially. Like, how are we going to improve this and prevent this?
And I haven't looked over it as extensively as you have, but from what I can tell, maybe what some people would say is it doesn't go far enough. Like you said, if Barron County already has all of these provisions and things implemented, then maybe there's more that needs to be done.
Yes. And I forgot to mention also some other things that it just would require. It would also require a suicide prevention awareness information to be provided to students. And there'd also be some mandates as far as people or staff that work directly with students. They would go through, I think it was an hour's worth of training just to be familiar with how to look for signs of mental illness, mental health. I can't speak today. And then there's also some issues here. They said that each school district provide a mental health professional to each 1,500 students. And I believe our school district has 2, recently hired a second one. So I feel like we're moving in the positive direction in that respect. Of course,
there's still further to go, right?
Yes, and this is something that's very modern and it's evolving, and of course it's passing through. It actually went to the Education Committee on January 11th, but it just passed out of that committee this week, and it's on the House floor to vote.
And we've got another House Bill 202, that deals with corporal punishment. Yeah. That's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is, and again, I will say this is kind of shocking because, I hadn't really done my research in the past to realize that Kentucky still allowed it.
In schools,
yeah.
Right.
And corporal punishment, obviously, if you don't know, is using force by a person to discipline. So spanking or paddling. I think flogging is in the wording of the bill that the current statute that's there, which seems
very antiquated.
Yes. So what's going to happen here? House Bill 202, which is also sponsored by our local representative Steve Riley, it would essentially allow educators, or it would not allow educators or school personnel to discipline children in a manner that's physical. And with that said, it would be a complete ban. don't know all of the counties. I believe there's 14 counties in Kentucky that still allow this to occur, Monroe County being one of them just for proximity purposes. But there are some shocking figures out there as far as other states. Typically our more democratic states like California, Minnesota, those states out there are typically, it's illegal. So I think Kentucky will eventually be added to that list of illegal or use of corporal punishment. But just for the fact that I'd like to say here, it says specific regulations including parental consent requirements for witnesses are enforced at the local level, and this is what's current. For instance, Bath County School District requires the use of wooden paddles that are no longer than 30 inches, which 30 inches is probably long enough considering the wind it would catch.
Yeah.
No wider than 5 inches and no thicker than 1 inch. Johnson County School District requires that there be 2 witnesses to any instance of corporal punishment.
Well, as long as someone sees it.
That's a little embarrassing. If I were being disciplined, I wouldn't want 2 people watching me be disciplined, but
they have to measure it.
I suppose. It's not a laughing matter because as I know as a child, when you're disciplined, you better not laugh. But I don't know. It's posted in committee. Hopefully, I don't think it would hurt to probably ban it. I mean, I know there's some children.
I can't imagine it being too controversial.
No. I definitely don't agree with beating children at all, but
especially in schools.
Yeah,
anything like that.
It seems a little out of order for someone else to discipline a child in a physical way. Of course, practicing respectful attitudes and things like that. Yeah. But again, that probably goes back to the initial raising of the child anyway. But beside that fact, it's posted in committee, so we'll try to see if it goes anywhere, and of course we'll update you on that. So what's going on nationally?
Yeah, in national news, one big story right now is with Huda Muthana.
Yes.
And she, in 2014, traveled to Turkey and had lied to her family saying it was a university trip. She then went to Syria where she joined ISIS. I don't know if that's exactly the right way to word it. I think she married someone who was in ISIS, but she was involved with it in some way. And now the group is driven out of the country of Syria, so she's trying to come back to the U.S. Right. So this is very controversial, and the controversy kind of lies in some saying that this is just another part of like the Muslim ban, and some people think that that's racist, and others see it as a threat to national security because she was involved with ISIS while she was gone and had the sketchy way of getting out of the country to begin with. So this has really gained a lot of national attention because the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the woman does not qualify for citizenship and has no legal basis to return to the country, so he will not be allowing her to get back in. And then President Trump said Wednesday that the United States would not readmit an American-born woman who traveled to Syria, that's Huda that they're speaking of, to join the Islamic State and now wants to come home. So that was in a tweet. He also reinforced that idea. So that's just really controversial right now.
And I think the controversy obviously arises, one side is, I'll tell you personally, I think, this is something we might consider looking, just at the respect that she went over to sympathize with, obviously, an enemy. And now that enemy has been
and it's
down,
unclear what the actual legal situation is, whether she does qualify for citizenship or not. This is what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, but he's not the end-all be-all of what's legal and what's not. But because he said that, it does gain a lot of attention.
And I'm not too sure where this might go. I do think it's interesting, though, that we have an issue like this in heat of just generally, with our domestic purposes of the blackface issues and going back to those racist things. Well, now this is more of a targeting of a religious group, as people are saying. I'm not saying that they're targeting her just because she is a Muslim, but I do think that it seems a little silly if I'm looking at it superficially.
And she says that she regrets what she did and she has since changed her mind on all that stuff, but it's hard to know because she didn't have any contact with her family at all and randomly came back.
Right.
It's interesting situation.
It's difficult to kind of assess the situation. I mean, part of you wants to probably allow her back in, like we're all human, we make mistakes, but this is a huge
Joining a terroristic organization
exactly.
is not.
It's not a human mistake, I would call.
Yeah.
It's definitely abnormal. Of course, that's in the news every day. It probably will be for several weeks now, because I'd say there might be some legal action taken on this if there
Definitely,
can be.
yeah.
I feel like this probably isn't the be all rather. This is definitely going to progress. And then just last today, we want to talk about Black History Month. Of course, February being Black History Month, I think it's important to honor Black history because it's been so influential on every aspect of our society, from our economy to our ethnic groups, and then just movements and just different things. And actually, Laurel, who was on the show last episode, is a part of the Poor People's Campaign, started by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, obviously an African-American man making a difference. But beside that, there's some interesting things that we have here locally that I think will probably kind of allow you to look at it a different way. And you've gathered some research here.
So just a brief history of Black History Month. According to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, after an extremely successful celebration of the 50th anniversary of emancipation, in which a site of exhibits showcasing Black history, the place was overflowing with so many visitors. Carter G. Woodson sent out a press release announcing that Negro History Week would be in February of 1926. Much later on down the road, President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976. So that's kind of how it began and how people started dedicating a month to looking at this history. And since our area and our school and stuff is overwhelmingly white, and Black history is not commonly taught in schools the same way that white history is, especially anything before slavery, nothing about like African American culture or anything like that. We just wanted to highlight some important local Black history. One of these is Leska Joseph Twyman. He was born in 1913 and he graduated from Indiana University. He served in the Philippines during World War II, and then he taught at, some of you may have heard of Ralph J. Bunch High School in Glasgow. It was the black school during segregation of schools.
And up until the consolidation of local schools, I believe Glasgow High School was built in 1965.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much when they all consolidated.
And his leadership helped to ensure a smooth transition from segregated to integrated schools. So he was instrumental in that in our area. And as a position as the city's first Black councilman led to his selection as mayor pro tem. And Twyman was eventually elected as the city's mayor in 1970, and he was the first African-American mayor. That was monumental for our town, I would say.
Yeah. Well,
especially in the 70s. That's very...
The first African-American mayor of Glasgow and the first African-American mayor west of the Mississippi, I'm pretty sure, in this area. Of course, I'd say in those northern states, there had probably been something. And don't quote me on that, I believe. I'm just gathering information from an event that I had actually
He also
went to
served
recently.
from 1970 to 1986. That's a long term for any mayor.
Absolutely. I mean, look at our last mayor. He served,
Two terms?
Was it one or two terms? I think it was just one.
One?
Yeah, and Lord, who knows about our current mayor?
So he was
I'm not
obviously
sure.
well liked.
Yeah, so
And
I think that's positive.
Very important person in Glasgow's history and Black history.
And the Twyman name is still around. This is a good name to have in terms of Mr. Twyman here and what he did. Next on our list, we have Willa Brown Chappell. She was a Glasgow historical marker. Reads, quote, co-founder of the National Airmen's Association of America, which worked to get African Americans into the U.S. Air Force. In 1940, she co-founded the Coffey School of Aeronautics, which trained black pilots of the Tuskegee Airmen. She was influential in the integration of the U.S. military in 1948. She also, in 1946, became the first African American woman to run for Congress.
I'd heard about the aeronautics stuff before, but I have not heard the Congress thing. That's really impressive.
Yeah, that's
national.
And although she lost to the incumbent, she remained politically active and fought for the integration of the U.S. Army Air Corps, according to the BG Daily News. I mean, that's great. that is absolutely phenomenal that we have not only one person, Mr. Leska Twyman, who was influential in local politics, but we have Miss Chappell, who made a difference nationally. I mean, that's quite impressive. I think that these two people here deserve to be honored, just for their work in general, but also I think it's phenomenal that there's a standpoint there to show that Black History Month is something that probably needs a little more observation in terms of just history around our schools. I mean, here locally, we don't get to talk about local history in our schools, period. So if there's any way we could talk about it, and these two people have obviously influenced greatly. So I commend them for their lives and our support of our community. And what's going on March 21st?
From February 1st to March 21st. Throughout that time, the Museum of the Barons Cultural Center will be having an exhibit of the churches of the Barons, which will showcase Black churches in the area. So that's really interesting, and if people are interested, they should stop by and check that out if you wanted to be more informed about Black history locally and all that.
Absolutely. I will say the Museum of the Barons, also the Cultural Center, the Museums of the Barons Cultural Center, however you want to put it, is a phenomenal place. I mean, the people there are volunteers. They do great work for our community in terms of the history. And you might say, well, I don't like history, but this is what...
check it out, right?
That's right. Our predecessors are what paved the way for what we have now. And if we can apply that locally, that's great for me, because when I'm looking and saying, well, President Gerald Ford did this, or President Carter did this, okay, but if I can say that, Mr. Twyman did this in terms of Glasgow, well, that's just more personal. I mean...
And if you don't look back to history, you can't understand what's going on now.
Let's see what's in the newspaper today.
Oh, hi there. I'm Brennan Crain, Editor-in-Chief of the Trojan Times. Happens to be the newspaper I was just reading. It's a pretty good newspaper if you ask me, but I'll let you know a little bit about that paper. It's ran out of Barron County High School's very own English Hall, and it's ran by a staff of students. Yeah, that's right, students are running this paper with the help of a very good advisor who are dedicated to preserving the history of Barron County High School and providing the #1 coverage of all things Barron County High. We've even been out in the community of Glasgow, Kentucky doing a few things, and we're just happy to serve you like that. So give us a check out at thetrojantimes.com. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're on there with pictures and posts, quick updates about school events, and any type of coverage that you need for Barron County High School. Thank you.
Well, I think that wraps it up for today, and all these topics were really interesting, and
yes.
If you have tips for things that you would like to see us discuss, or you have something that's going on in the community locally, then you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, right? On the Trojan Times and the Trojan Tea on Twitter, right?
Yes, we have the Trojan Tea on Twitter, but we haven't really kind of progressed with that. But definitely follow the Trojan Times in general, just for BCHS updates, news going on, and it's not like it's, well, we're doing this at BCHS this week. It's news at BCHS, things that matter in respect to meetings and things like that. And we also have just some creative things going on, some articles that give some opinion, some insight into some common things. And so I'm proud of the organization to be the editor of that organization. But I think it's also good for people just to be involved, especially with student journalism and just the furthering of journalism itself. So, like I said, that pretty much wraps it up for today. I'm Brennan Crain.
And I'm Grace Lowe.
And this has been the Trojan Tea.